Well, this is Dr. Lemmon again, and we're looking at March. And I've been playing with the concept of talk a little bit about teaching. So this is not so much a teaching, it's about the process of teaching. And so I started out in the beginning saying what the interface is in January, when you go ahead and have students in front of you, how receptive they are. I think that's the first thing to understand in any type of communication, not necessarily teaching, but I think the experience of relating to another human being is a teaching, right? Do look at how we learn. We have learned when you were born, you didn't know very much. And you learned, my goodness, we find children learn what? A new word every 90 minutes in context, they can use it. So the learning curve is profound when you're first born. Or when you start something new, when you open up a range that's not familiar, your learning curve goes up, it expedites, you learn faster, right? So we start to look at that and we start to realize that when you sit down and have a talk with someone and you're just having a cup of coffee and say, you know, what's wrong with the world and blah, 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 and why didn't things go this way or that way or whatever chitter chatter comes into, you're really wandering out, bumping against the perimeters you've defined as range. And you're looking at someone to say, yeah, this is as far as I can go. Validate that. And if they validate that, now you've got a really good bonded friendship and you're both losers together. I know it sounds like a judgment, but losers in the context of building range. If instead someone says, well, consider it this way, then it expands a little bit. If you're receptive to that, you've expanded it a little bit. That's good news. If you're not receptive, you get up, get your cup of coffee, tell him he's an idiot and walk away. And that's probably good news for him because then he doesn't have to repeat himself a million times, which I've got used to doing. So if I seem like I talk too much, it's because I talk a lot. So the dynamic that we have coming into is that interchange between communications with people is inherently, from the moment we're born, part of our ability to adapt and adjust to being a human living on a planet. We had to figure this out from someone. You take a baby and throw them on the ground and they don't do well, right? Just toss them in trash cans has not worked out real good for them. We've seen that in newspapers. All right, so we start to understand that it's a learning curve. I think that the first thing that comes up, whether it's the most predominant or not, is a debate, but the world of psychology thinks it's actually pretty predominant, and that is that this piece is designed to survive, right? Because the odds have always been against us, Homo sapiens, us people walk around erect, because our enemies are always bigger than us, tougher than us. We really had to out-negotiate them, which is part of the reason, I suppose, at least in theory, that we developed a brain is so we could kind of outthink them. What we see is most animals that we interact with are very much habitual, right? They run out into patterns. They do things in cycles. They're somewhat predictable, right? It doesn't mean that they can't adapt and learn to some relative degree. We have seen that, most certainly. We've trained them. But we sometimes wonder, because they've learned something to be social doesn't really mean that they quite understand the skill set. And that's some of the questions we've had with chimpanzees and things. It's like, if you get them in a room together and there's some food in there, no matter what, they've been used since the time they were born to being fed and food is always provided, they'll still go to war and fight over a banana. And it's like, wow. But, and, we see humans that kind of do the same thing. So I guess maybe we've still got some of those monkey genes. I'm not sure which. Anyway, to start out with, you start to see it's kind of like you're looking at a human communication, but not just somebody telling you. It's a human communication, which means both of you have some interaction, both of you have some contribution to that. That's really, really tough because most people want to sell a story because that validates them. So now I have two games. When you're born, I think the information you're learning is about, number one, how to keep you alive. Your brain, you're analyzing maybe 9 systems. Right now, they think in parallel. For the most part, what that's all doing is trying to keep you alive, trying to figure out what's a danger and what isn't, right? And that's just learning, right? It's really hard to understand when you're a little kid not to touch the oven. But then on other days, you can touch the oven and no one yells at you. So you're thinking, are these people crazy? What is the rule here? It takes a while to understand the rules. It takes a while to understand why some things are a risk at sometimes and other times not. You can go play in the front yard, but you can't play in the street. That's a hard thing to understand. Those learning things are mostly defensive, right? Yes, there are some learning things that allow us to be interactive, right? Or if we didn't have some of that skill, we'd never get a date. This whole game would be over pretty quick. So we have two learning elements that come into play. Number one is survival, and number two is interaction. And if you start to look at the body, there are some things that are demand. If you don't drink water over a certain period of time, you don't do well. The longer you don't drink water, 2, 3 days, 4 days, you're just not going to make it. You can probably go without a pizza for 10 years, but a glass of water is another whole story. So you start to see that there's a demand piece inherent. We have to, and we get that when we're little. We're hungry, and we let somebody know we're hungry. We're uncomfortable. We're very uncomfortable, and we get to understand that data, that my experience is stored in unconscious patterns in the body. So it's learned, right? I don't know where that learning is at. Nobody knows, but the patterns most certainly are sitting in there somewhere where it tells you some things. I personally, there's a lot of arguments about, unconscious, subconscious, blah, blah, blah. But I like to look at unconscious patterns as being about movements and subconscious patterns being about stories. And it makes it simple. And I've done that from having 30, 40 years of teaching, right? So when someone comes up with a story and they finally figure out maybe that's not 100% true, maybe that kept them alive in a moment, maybe that all of a sudden got them some friendship or got them an interaction or got them mad at someone, all had an effect. But where does that go? What is that effect? And is that inherently something that we need to, this device, your body, stores all those experiences just inherently to keep you alive. The more skill set you have at those interactions, the better your judgments are at staying alive, right? It doesn't guarantee you success. There are some people that have, my goodness, there are some people that lived on a planet for a long time, and they've just adapted to hunting. They've just adapted to building some type of shelter. My gosh, they managed to create a relationship and have children, but you look at their survival conditions, it was wonderful at a time when food was healthy, water was healthy, things weren't so polluted. So we have experimented with increasing productivity, and in doing so, we have kind of hampered it a little bit. You can see why I think this body essentially has to figure out, how do I stay alive? That's why health is such a big issue today. People that aren't paying attention to healthiness and healthy things and healthy habits, exercise, etc., are a wonderful demonstration of what unhealthy looks like, right? So people come back and talk to me and they say, what do you do? And I say, well, I read books. I'm not sure that's good for my eyesight. I got a pair of glasses on. It's like that. Those are technically speaking reading glasses, but I've been wearing them for so many years. It's kind of like the product of reading at it. I never read. Why? Maybe I wouldn't need the glasses. Who knows? Or maybe I wouldn't know I needed them. Who knows, right? I guess if I would have been a hunter, then I would have still maybe needed the glasses. I don't know. We don't have. There's not a manual when we were born. I'm sorry, it's just not a manual. So we're brought into a tribe or culture, to our family, which is the introduction to their culture, their tribe, their belief system. We're brought into their ideology, the thoughts, the way that they interact. I'm going to, those things become what I call a demand. So they're patterned into your body. They're inherently like, this is the way it is. This is a demand. You have to know this to survive. At some point in time, you start to realize that maybe it's not that we need to know it to survive. Maybe we need to have it just to manage us. I mean, sometimes our parents are saying, learn this, do it this way so you don't get hurt. Other times they just doing it so they don't have to go look for you, right? So I know I had a really good relationship with my grandmother when I was growing up, just because the fact by the time I was 5 years old, I would have what little breakfast I had preschool. So wasn't in first grade yet. I would go ahead and have my little breakfast in the morning and I'd say, I'm going to go to the park. I will see you later. And she said, be home by dinner. Dinner was not like the main meal. Lunch is the main meal, but my grandfather worked at some place where he couldn't come home. So the main meal on Sunday was lunch time. That was the main meal. Dinner time was like a bowl of soup or a sandwich. It was really pretty small, right? And she might give me a couple of cookies to take with me. And pretty soon she found a lot of times I'd leave them on the table. So she just finally got out of the habit of doing anything. And I just went and explored. I just got to know the neighbors. I got to know the people that worked in the neighborhood. It's a small town. I got to know people. I just got to, I knew everybody. I just wandered around. I watched people work and I asked them questions. And in those days, there was not a big demand on them to get done in a rush. So they'd stop and talk to you. They'd help you out. Interactions were a lot freer, a lot simpler. And then we went into a stage later on where it became defended, right? And so when I got married and started having children, I was kind of like, that was my status quo. I would go to, when my kids were little, I used to always tell them we go to a restaurant. I said, don't tell anybody your dad owns this restaurant. So you can kind of do whatever you want to, but, keep it within context. My wife and I would sit down and have dinner and the kids never ate with us. They went and they introduced themselves to people in the restaurant. People were nice to them. They fed them. That was all growing up. I played it that they got to interact with people in a somewhat safe environment because we were there. That people weren't going to kidnap them or something, which was occurring at the time my kids were born. It was like, that was the fad at the time for interaction with people, steal kids, get whatever money, whatever. And it's like, I had them interact. I just had them talk to people, negotiate, talk, right? What I found is that this system of keeping us alive produces a lot of demands. You have to do it this way. That's how we learned it too. We have to do it this way. You have to do it that way. It's a lot of demands. So when all of a sudden you have to make a decision for yourself, something unknown, you're looking around for what the demand is. What's the code? How do we do this? What's the right way? We're asking questions. How do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? Gosh, I'm not sure that that's not a bad answer, but I think the first question you really got to ask is, do I want to do this? Do I want to do this? When I asked the question, do I want to do this? That's what I learned when I was 5. I wanted to go not down to the basement and play with my toys. I wanted to go out that front door and explore the world. I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to interact in a different way. Yes. And when my kids were growing up, I had them go interact in a different sort of way. My daughter would come back and said, hey, I met some really nice people over there and they want to know if I'd come back to lunch tomorrow. I said, sounds great. Go to lunch. I mean, what? She told me where they lived. It's like, am I intimidated? No, because I explored. I was at risk. I took and pushed back a little bit on that demand so that I could convert that whole piece into a request. My grandmother made a request, be back by 5. Cool. I got it. That's it. Sometimes I was back before 5. Sometimes I was late and I was in trouble. I didn't mind being in trouble. I didn't see a problem with that. Okay. So is there a consequence for action? Oh, I think that's a good lesson. There's a consequence for action, right? You bump your head one time, it hurts. You bump your head the second time, now you're dumb. You bump your head the third time, you deserve to really bleed a little, right? That's part of the nature of learning. Because what bumped you on the head was a demand that you duck, right? So I have learned in life to duck. If I don't duck the first time, I bump it the second time, I get flustered, and I say to myself, I either have to learn to duck my head or have to fix that low beam that I'm bumping my head on. When you're under the house and those low beams or joists, they're a little tough to fix. So, so I have to do something, right? I have to do something to support the idea of learning. So I might play the game. Okay. So it's like, I got to crawl under there and fix something. So instead of just having all my attention on where I'm crawling to fix, I get all my tools, I get it in a bucket, I get it all together. I'm going to say, okay, there are so many structured beams under there. So I'm going to count them. Every time I go in there, I count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've changed my relationship to the beams. The beams were a demand to support the house. They weren't intended to bump me on the head. But I don't have an early warning system up here. Like, most really wise people have a hair. I'm not so smart, so I don't have any. So I don't have an early warning system. So it just smacks into my head, and then I got blood running down. I can't see, and it's a nightmare. So I have to create a game. Do you see? So they change that demand into a request. The request is, I don't need to bump my head. Do I? No, that's the request. My request is, I don't need to bump my head. Do I expect the beams are going to do anything about that? No, they're not. They're just making a demand. Support the house. Support their house. That's their demand. I'm crawling into the house. Who might argue with their demand? I can turn that into a request. I can say, oh, the request is that I get my head below the beam and come back up on the other side. By converting that demand, by making a different story, by changing my relationship to the beam, I then can duck my head, and I got to count them so that there's a rhythm, a pacing. I don't want to miss one because my head is not going to miss it. It's going to hit it. So I've got to have a conscious relationship with that. You see, that's the same with another human. It's the same thing. They sit there and they have this little narrow range, and they think everybody should think the same way they do. It's safer. Everybody should act like they do. It's safer. It's predictable. It makes you feel a little more secure, which is a false sense of security, right? But most certainly, it's a false sense of security because we have a lot of uncertainty. So we have to have this secure system informing us, and we have to be able to convert that system to open up so the range expands, so we have more data, so that we can then, in extreme changes, like in snow or rain, that we can handle something that's not a normal everyday one, right? So when I'm driving down the road and all of a sudden it's a minus 14 degrees and I got to drive for the next 4 hours, I have enough life experience to say, okay, I got it. I can remember coming home for a trip and it was a minus 14 degrees. My wife and I were going down the road, and literally in the next 2.5, 3 hours, I counted 22 vehicles off the road. I didn't go off the road, but there was other people that didn't go off the road too. I wasn't the wisest person on the road. There was a significant amount of people that didn't manage to go off the road, but there were some that did. I'm not trying to fault the ones that did, but you understand the slippery road and the ice minus 14 degrees pretty much is a demand, right? That you're not going to be able to stop if you put your brakes on. It's not going to work. So you're going to have to slow down. You're going to have to negotiate. You're going to have to leave enough space between you and the person in front of you so that you can slow down, down gear, do whatever, and not be driving 50, 60 miles an hour. I was on that road and people go zipping by me. And next thing I know, I'd see them off the side of the road somewhere. My wife had said, "You're going to stop and help them?" I said, "I don't think so, because they'd just be mad at me. They're going to be really upset. They might say thank you, but they're going to be upset because they just passed me and they thought I was wrong. And now you think all of a sudden they're going to think I was wiser? I don't think so. They're going to think that whatever, they got unlucky." That there was a demand and he did not relate to the demand. They didn't convert it to a request. It was a good request to drive a little slower and a little safer. It was a demand that if you drive faster, you get hurt. Those are our relationships in life. We have to find a balance between those pieces. So when I decided to start teaching, I opened a center and I called it Pursuing Life Potentials. So we would talk to people and say, what doesn't work for you? All right. I had a lady come in one time and she said, I'm working in an office and I'm busy working. She did paperwork of some sort. And she says, I'm busy working. I think she did evaluations on classes. She was working for college systems. People would do surveys and she would analyze the surveys and count them up and blah, 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 and write a report on it. And she was a reasonably intelligent lady, a very, very nice lady. And I met her because she was dating one of my students, and that's how I got introduced to her. And she was telling me the story that when she's in there working, she doesn't smile, she frowns. She says, I never noticed it because I never looked at myself in the mirror. But my supervisor came to me and she said, you're doing really good work. You're one of the best workers I have, but everyone else is complaining because you're always frowning. And so she said to me, am I always frowning? And I said, well, let's just first off start with, before we start to put out a fire that's not burning, let's find out if so get a mirror, put a mirror in a frame on your desk so you can look at it, and then put the word smile at the bottom. And so that way you look in the mirror and you see your frown, you smile at the mirror. Don't worry about those people. Who cares about them? This is about you. So maybe let's just make up a story here. Let's just say that growing up, where you grew up was not the nicest of neighborhoods. She told me in her story. So consequently, you probably didn't go around with a big smile saying hi to everybody because they would cut your throat or kidnap you or sell you or whatever. So you kept your head down and you didn't smile and you mind your own business and they ignored you. You became invisible, right? Okay, I got it. So now you got a habit. Here you are, 40 years old, and now you got a habit from childhood to survive. Okay, so change the game for your value, no one else's. Look at the mirror and smile at the mirror whenever you see it. Don't sit there and stare at it all day. You won't get any work done. But look at the mirror every now and then, look at the mirror and go, oh, okay. And put the clock right next to the mirror so that you're looking at the clock in the mirror at the same time. So the habit pattern is like occasionally you look at the clock to see what time it is because you got a lunch schedule, you got blah, blah, blah. So put the mirror right next to it. So she started doing that. And she said, I started smiling and I would smile, but then immediately I'd go back into a frown. And then I'd look back and I would smile and immediately I'd go back into a frown. So next time I saw her, she says, how's it working? She said, well, it's not changing my habit, but I'm noticing that I do frown all the time. I said, okay, well, that's the first step. Now we have the information. We know you do that. Now what we really need to do is to go back into that and find that unconscious pattern, and we'll start to work on that pattern. You and I will start to work on that pattern, see if we can get out of there. Well, that sounded a little too woo-woo for her. Okay. And I'm not telling her that, hey, I've got a PhD in this stuff. I've got an education. I got papers. That wasn't part of my conversation. We had just two people talking, right? I just said, I just made you aware. Now the next step is what can we do to fix it? We stage these things gently so that it's a change in your relationship to life, not one more thing on a to-do list, which pretty soon every to-do list becomes a demand. It really needs to be a change in habit, the habit of being, right? So that's where I was going with it, right? Well, she didn't come back and see me. She just wrote that off. It's like, I'm just some nutcase, right? And she went down, and can you imagine this? She got a tattoo. She went and had surgery done. She had these muscles pulled up, plastic surgeons, and she had this little corners of her lips curved up with a tattoo. So it looked like something out of a Batman movie. It didn't look bad. It looked like when she wasn't smiling, at least there was a little turn up, a little, right? And the muscles were pulled so she couldn't frown. So they were stitched up. So that cost her, I don't know how much. And it all of a sudden, well, so he came to an event and brought her some class, some workshop, some seminar I did. And he came to it and brought his girlfriend, who had now the permanently infixed demand to smile. And I said, well, that's interesting. She's telling me the story. I didn't criticize. I said, well, that's kind of cool. Yeah, it's like, how's that working? And she said, well, not really very well. And I said, why? How is that? Well, I started realizing that I don't think I really like the people I work with. My boss I really like, but the rest of the people in the office, I don't really like them. They're kind of busybodies, and they got a little more social with me, but they're talking about garbage. I don't really want to. They're just got complaints. They're just whining about the job. They're whining about this or whining. It's like maybe I gained something, but I'm not sure I wanted it, so I quit. It's like, wow. So you had your body restructured and you quit because it didn't work. I was trying to guide her to there, but I failed. Literally, I failed. I just couldn't, I didn't click with her for whatever. I didn't say it the way that she wanted to hear it. So she went to the experts, right? That solved her problem by finding the problem probably wasn't really hers in the first place, right? In truth, she just had a trust issue with people. She didn't want to relate to them. So I suggested that, since she didn't want to take classes, I suggested that she go find an organization that she could relate to away from work, a women's group that she could talk to, some people that could be into a counseling group, or maybe some church that she could go to. And so she did. She went ahead and joined a church. And then immediately when she joined the church, her and her boyfriend broke up. So I only ever saw her one more time after that. And I actually didn't see her. I got an email from her one more time. I got an email from her saying, I want to thank you for all your help. I already said I didn't think I really helped her very much. I just tried, but we never got on the same page. But she says, I want to thank you for all your help. I now belong to this church. And I told them that I had talked to you, you were a counselor, and they said, if I want to keep my membership in this church, I need to disassociate with you and my boyfriend and all those people of the past that were really, the product of Satan. So consequently, I'm just letting you know that I don't want to ever see you again, nor will I be around, and I don't want any more communication. I'd go like, wow, that's interesting. Boy, that really made a big difference. Now she has a smiley face that don't work. And now she's going to have a life with a really narrow range. And if it makes her happy, well, that's fine. I'll never know, and I don't need to know, right? It wouldn't make me happy. But it's like, I have done workshops in various different churches. I've had to tailor things because I have to say, what language do you allow in your organization and what language do you not allow, right? Um, I had a lady that came to a talk I did, introductory talk, 40, 50, 60 people. I'm just talking, and so she came over afterwards and she got a little business card from me and she said, oh, well, it was a very inspiring talk. And I go, yeah, it's nice. Okay, whatever, right? And then a few weeks later, she called me and she said, my daughter and I, so obviously her daughter and her, sounds like she's divorced. My daughter and I had planned a trip to go swim with the dolphins. Okay, well, that sounds like an exciting new age adventure. At least she's making friends with something on the planet, right? And I said, oh, that's good. It sounds like fun, and she says, yeah, but she says, I booked it. I got everything and I've lost it. I can't find it. And the deadline's coming up and I need to get all this material together and I'm going crazy and I'm trying to get hold of these people and blah, 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 blah. And it's just total frantic. The demand level was so high. It was unbelievable. Like everything, coordinating the trips, confirming it, everything was just a demand. There was no her in the mix, no her, unless she had her daughter. And so I'm going, okay, stop, relax, take a breath. I'll take a look. So I'm looking and I say a question. I said, this paper, stack of papers with a clip on them have disappeared. So where are they at? I mean, I don't know. What? Give me a clue. Give me a clue. World, give me a clue, whatever. I just create a little symbol out there of a dolphin because she's talking about dolphins. So I got a symbol of a dolphin, a crazy new age idea, right? I got a symbol of a dolphin. I say, hey, where's this at? And the next thought that comes into my head is that, oh, it's below a bunch of blue things. So I said to her, well, the only thing I get intuitively, so to speak, I don't know what you call that, right? Whatever. All I get is that it's below a bunch of blue things. Do you have blue stuff in a drawer? I said, oh my God, I know exactly where that's at. Thank you. And she hung up. That's it. So I go, okay. So then a few weeks go by, matter of fact, it was about a month, and she showed up at my center. And she said, I want to talk to you about classes. I said, well, you don't have to talk to me. Just show up. If you don't like it, you leave. Right. And I have a charge for classes, but if you want, say, I'm not going to pay to the end. I'm not going to pay unless I like it. That's fine with me too. I don't care. Makes no difference to me. Right. And she goes, oh, okay. Well, she said, where I found those papers, and I had to think for a minute because I'd kind of totally forgotten all about it. And she said, I have all these file folders that are blue. And when you said it was underneath it, I went to put it in a file folder and I missed and it slipped down and was laying underneath all the file folders. And I was pulling them back and forth. I didn't see it. And there it was. It just fell through. I said, okay, that's, cool. And you found it. You went on your trip. Oh, yeah, it was marvelous. Blah, 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 blah. Went on and on. And it's like, okay. So I said, well, the class is going to start on Tuesday night. So we'll see you here. I'm looking forward to having you in class and share some of your stories and so on and so forth. And so on Tuesday night, she shows up a little bit early. I was just getting there and she comes over and she said, I called to apologize. I said, oh, what did we do wrong? But, she said, no, I apologize because I wanted to come to your class and I talked to my minister in my church and he said I should not do that. So she said, so I'm going to send you a check for your services. I go, for my services. You mean helping you find that? Yeah. I said, you don't need to send me a check. Thank you very much. I'm glad you had a good experience. Let's just say it's my gift to your daughter so that she had a very enriching experience swimming with the dolphins. How cool is that, right? And she says, oh, you're so nice. And she walked out the door. And 2 weeks later, I got a check for $100. So I just got bought and sold. That became my value. Like, wow. Um, Friendship wasn't value. Being of assistance was not value. The $100 was value. Um, I guess I got put in the same categories or minister, maybe. I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm just sharing with some stories. And I think these stories to me have started to realize that it's not about a power game. It's not about, oh, I'm powerful. I can make this happen. And I get all these people that come to me and it's like, oh, I can make this happen. I can make lights blink. I can do this. I can do that. I'm going like, okay, like, what is that worth? Right. I'm not always sure that what that's worth. Right. But then I've had other people, and so have you, that you had a really good relationship with. You can sit down and talk to. You have really good. It's very intriguing. I find that when you hit the range where someone is comfortable to go, at that point, they just can't go any farther. All right. So all my classes, as we put them together, I put classes together in 3 sets, 6 weeks each, because it's a small commitment, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks. When I originally did classes way back when I put a center together, I'm long retired. I'm old, come on. But when I had a center, I put it together. The names have changed many, many times, depending on the group that's coming in the door. You know, it's like marketing. It's like you have to make something that catches their attention. I'm sad to say, but you have to kind of offer them a cookie, right? Or something. So I call the classes Energy Essentials, 6 weeks of classes to get the sense of paying attention to your energy, ground your body, start to feel that. All it is to build a relationship with potential, which is not making a demand. Potential is something you imagine. Your imagination is not making a demand. It's just like, it's there. Then as you think about it and build a relationship with those imagined pieces, you might find a demand to implement it, to go out and make it happen. But when you go to do that, then you run into an external piece. An external piece is the world of structure, the world of logic. So in the world of logic, does it have value? But inspiration doesn't care about value, but the logical world says. So when friends of mine said, I want to write a book, I'm inspired. I said, okay. And what's your goal in writing a book? Well, I got to put all these ideas together into a book. I said, okay, well, that sounds good. If that's your goal, that's fine. And do you expect to make money? Well, maybe. I said, well, maybe not. But as you sit down and sit with this process of being able to get all this together, your life story, you're trying to translate everything you did, which was just inspiration. And here you are in life. Are you a multimillionaire? Are you really rich? Are you really wealthy? Do you have criterions of success? How many Mercedes-Benz do you have in your garage? How many thousands of houses and chateaus in Paris do you have in France and in the Alps? And so when you're on the structured world, where do you sit? Well, my wife and I live in a mobile home, out a little bit out in the city, in the county, and like, okay, that's cool. So as long as you recognize that making a book is like telling a story, it puts you in the process of your life. It doesn't necessarily integrate you into the structure of value that the world has. Book writers don't make a lot of money, but it has a huge amount of value in your relationship with yourself. I would, number one, engage your wife in the middle of this so she could have some fun with it and help you, and it would strengthen your relationship. She would see the end value for it. Maybe you could help her write a book about her life, and that would be fun too. And he's kind of looking at me. He said, well, I'm going to do it. I said, go do it. Go do it, most certainly. So yeah, what a book comes out, I think every 90 minutes or something like that. I don't know. It's crazy. There's a lot of books out there. People say to me, why don't you write a book? It's like, lucky to get me to do a video. Because I'm not sure that's very receptive. The demand is greater than the request. And you have to convert all those demands into requests. So Energy Essentials is the first class, 6 weeks. Way back when I was teaching, I don't teach anymore, not there anymore. So don't call me and say you want to sign up for classes. I don't do that anymore. I have a lot of people that I have taught to be teachers, and they're out teaching classes. They probably have different names on them. I don't know what they did. I have no idea. The second one was utility. Utility means like, first thing is essentials. Where's the energy come from? The creative piece, the potential. Where's it come from? Get a relationship with that. The second thing is utility. That's value. Utility means value. Where can I take that outside and apply it? Like the woman had called and said, where's my paperwork at? And I had to kind of imagine a dolphin out there and let the dolphin tell me something. It's like, I literally had to make it up in the context of how do I solve her problem? Because I don't know how to solve it. So it's a question I'd ask outside. Does it have value? It had value because I was just trying to be friendly to me. That was all the value. Realistically, in the end, I didn't get a friend. I got $100. I would have had a friend and $100, truthfully, but it's whatever. And the third one of the classes series of 6 weeks is what's called communications, which is what we're doing right now. We're communicating ideas. It's really odd talking to a machine. I like talking to people. I like feeling that energy flow back and forth. And you don't get that out of talking to this screen here. So those are the elements. If you would like, say, the curriculum for, say, energy essential class, and you want to play with these ideas, and you've got someone you want to sit down and do that with, a friend or a partner, send me an email. I will send you the 12, 14 pages, whatever, in PDFs, and you can do that, or you can go out and teach it and make money, or you could, I don't care what you do with it. I will send it to you. Yeah. And you don't have to send me $100. You don't have to send me anything. I don't care about it. I will most certainly share. Email it to me. If you have any questions, email it to me, right? If you don't like my answers, not a problem. If you do like my answers and they work for you, great, share them with someone else. Let's build life going forward. Let's get out of the way it was. Let's take a look at how it's going to be. We have to move forward. We're in a state of, if I need to build a fort to defend myself, I'm moving into the past. I really need to. I have not seen any lions and tigers on the street. We don't need defenses against wild animals or wild people. Are there some crazy people? Statistically less, right? We're getting along a little better. It is mental illness on the upswing. Yeah, mental illness is on the upswing because of the high stress levels, because of the high demand. The people aren't, yes, they're not going out and killing people as much as they used to, but what they are most certainly doing is they're getting into rages, they're getting frustrated, they're getting mad. They're like, from my first class in January, when I was talking to you guys here on this format, they're like the people that come to class that they want the answer to life in their terms, in their context, and they don't sit in their context, so they'd already be doing it. That's just where it is. So I've talked long enough. You get an idea. If you would like those things, that's fine. I will then next month, this is March, so in April, if I'm still alive, I most certainly will put another one of these up, and we'll start to take a look, maybe go into a little bit of like, what is the essentials that you start to come up with in a process of going through classes. This is really about teaching, not about the material, right? Once again, but material's there. You can play with it as much as you want, do what you want with it. I'm just trying to support this. But we need to come to terms to become a global people. And to become a global people, one way to do that is to make it a demand to be a global people. And that means that all the tribes would have to die. Not the people, but the tribe membership. Some people will die for their tribe membership. So people die as tribe memberships die. And that does not need to be that way. So we have to open up a range to entertain the idea how we'll be one people, one world, right? Because the problems we're facing, pollution, climate change, et cetera, starvation, water problems are global now. We can't fix that in Minnesota. We have to get a bigger view. We have to become a united global people. Will it happen overnight? Maybe 300-400 years. Okay, so we're in one of the steps of that process of developing it. That's my belief. Okay, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way we're going forward. So because I'm thinking forward, I'm trying everything I can to become part of that assessment and move forward to that reality. So anyway, thank you very much, and contact me, Chris at CHRISS@wizardscatch.com. Send me a note or send a response to this, and I will try to reply to you just so that I've got your email address in my system. But most certainly send me personal questions. It's not a problem. I'm an old retired person. We got nothing better to do but sit around and answer questions, right? More or less. At least it's important enough that I would do it. So thank you very much, and look forward to talking to you next month.